Hi everybody, it's Julessa, and yes, I know, it's been 2 weeks since I said I was going to have a project video, and it's going to be a little bit longer for a project video, but I wanted to let you all know that I've been really struggling to get back behind the bench after being gone from it for so long. It's been literally about 9 months since the last time I made anything at my bench, and that is completely out of character for me. I generally don't spend maybe more than a day or two away from the bench, and for me to be away from the bench for 9 months, it's a long time. So I found myself in this little beat myself up cycle, and I don't want to do that anymore. So today we are going to do something a little bit different. I will have a project video for you later in the week, but for today what we're going to do is some practice soldering, just to get the old skills oiled up and get back behind the bench and be able to feel like I'm accomplishing something today, because I know it's time for me to get back to the bench and it's time for me to stop procrastinating, quite frankly. And I don't know why that is. But anyway, let's get to the bench and do some soldering practice. I'll see you on the other side. Okay, so the first thing we're gonna do is prep for soldering. I've got these pieces of copper that were in my scrap pile that I'm gonna be using today, and they're kind of dirty, and I don't wanna spend a lot of time at the sink washing and cleaning them, so the next best thing is to use a little bit of sandpaper and scrub them down a little bit so that you can get a good fit on your metal and get a good tight solder joint on it. So I'm gonna go ahead and rough these up a little bit, which does a little bit of cleaning. I'm going to try not to touch with my fingers too much in the areas that I'm going to be soldering, because that leaves finger oils and that will block the solder from flowing. So I'm just going to clean up the section I'm planning on soldering. So that's one piece down. We're going to do a little sweat soldering, try to do some pick soldering, and just kind of get back into the rhythm of using the torch again. Because like I said, it's been 9 months since the last time I used the torch. I don't even think I've fired it up in the last 9 months at all. And that's really sad. It makes me sad just to think about it. So we're going to make me happy today, and we're going to do some soldering. Okay, that's piece number 2. Now this piece is going to be one that I'm going to fix the joint, and then we're going to solder it closed and then solder it flat to the sheet using a pick solder. See, you can even tell it's been a long time since I've been at the bench because I can't even get my joint together. Oh, that's sad. Not again. We're not doing this again. We're going to stick to our soldering, get back to the bench every day, get back into the routine. There, that's fixed. And then on this piece, the reason why I'm going to work on this one is because I've got an end here that's kind of pointed. And if I try to solder that to anything, it's not going to have enough surface area for the solder to grip onto. So I'm going to use my jeweler's saw and cut it so that it's flush. That way I have a nice surface to attach by soldering. I might cut a few pieces. There's one. It even feels strange to hold the tools in my hand, and that is very disconcerting. See, I'm even struggling here. So don't feel bad if it's been a while since you've been at the bench and you haven't been soldering or sawing or anything like that, because, you know, life kind of gets in the way sometimes, and you just got to kind of go with it and do what's best for you and get back to the bench as soon as you can. Okay, I think that's good. So let's go over to the soldering area. Okay, so I have my liquid flux here. I had to spend some time cleaning out my dispenser because it was so unused that it was all crusty and I couldn't get any of my flux to come out. Yeah, just goes to show you how long it's been. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to sweat solder this little heart to that piece of copper there. So the first thing I want to do is get my flux and spread it all around on my little heart. Be overly generous. And actually, I don't think my flux, I think it's expired. So I may have to switch to my paste flux because I had a feeling this was going to happen. My regular liquid flux has expired, so it doesn't have any of the same properties and it won't go on my metal. So I'm gonna get some paste flux on here. I need my tweezers. I need to get a nice neutral flame on my torch. And it's been a while since I've lit my torch, so bear with me. There's a good neutral flame. I have my solder here. I'm going to put a few pallions on here. Now I use wire flux, or I'm sorry, wire solder. So I'm going to put about 5 pieces on here. And I pre-cut this using my solder chompers. So they're exactly the same size everywhere. I'm gonna start off by heating my flux because I don't want these solder pallions to jump around too much. Yeah, I think my other flux is a little bit old. Okay, so I got them sticking here. Now all I'm going to do is melt it enough to stick to the copper. Wow, that went a lot faster than I was expecting it to go. Okay, now I still need to flux my larger piece of copper. I should have done that in the first place, but I'm going to go ahead and do that now. Give the other one a chance to kind of cool just a little bit. I'm going to be generous with my flux. And remember, if it's been a while, do not pick up the metal with your fingers because you will burn yourself. Oh, even my board is not wanting to cooperate. See, this is why you got to practice if it's been a while. Now I'm heating the larger piece to bring that up to temperature because the smaller piece has already been kind of brought up to temperature with the initial soldering operation. I forgot to grab my solder pick, and that would be helpful. So I'm actually bringing the heat within 1/4 of an inch from the sheet because I want that larger sheet to heat up fast so that I can get my solder to flow. And I probably don't have my heat up high enough, so I'm going to give myself a little bit more flame here. Keep it at a neutral flame, but just give you a little bit more heat. That way you can heat up the surface area a little bit quicker. Quicker. And we should begin to see the solder flow here pretty quickly. Yep, there it goes. I'm pressing down just a little bit because I want to make sure that it's sealing all the way around. Yeah, looks good. I'll get that off while it's still warm. Piece of my soldering board. And as you can see, my tools have not been properly checked. There we go. So yeah, that looks good. Let's see if we can get it off the board here. I'm going to quench that. And then look at it real quick. And you can see there's a little bit of solder that kind of seeped up over the top, which that just means I had a little bit too much on there, but sometimes it's better to have a little too much than not enough. I can see that there's a nice little solder ring all the way around that heart, so it should be soldered very well. We'll stick it in the pickle and we'll check it in a little bit later. Okay, so this next thing we're going to do is we are going to solder this ring closed. Now, I already got the joint together, but I want to double check the joint, make sure it's tight before I try and solder it. I'm going to hold it with my third hand because I have one. If you don't have one, you can lay it flat on the board, that's fine. And I'm going to do what we call pick soldering. I'm going to put the solder on my board, then place it on my pick and stick it on the ring. First I want a flux. Get myself a piece of solder and stick it right there. I'm going to turn my flame down just a hair, so it's a little bit smaller flame. I still want it to be neutral though. I'm going to heat my solder up, pick it up with my pick, and then I'm going to heat my ring at the joint, and then place my solder right on top. Oh, there it went. That went pretty fast. Okay, so I'm having a good day. That's a good thing. All right, I'm happy about that. That makes me feel good. Quench it, I'll stick it in the pickle, and we'll move on to the next solder operation. Now, this one's a little bit more challenging, and if you really want to get yourself into the groove of soldering and trying to up your skills, you can do a couple of things. Now, you saw me earlier, I cut this straight across because I'm planning on soldering these end to end like this, just as practice. So I've got a larger piece and a smaller piece, so I got to learn to control my heat in order to solder those two pieces together. But if I wanted to do something a little bit more challenging, I could have cut them at a 45-degree angle like that and try to solder them together that way. Trying to make different angles because I know there's a lot of popularity out there for you know, odd shaped stones, geometrically odd shaped stones, and like kites and octagons and things like that. And sometimes to make a setting, you have to cut your pieces in order to create that corner to hold the stone setting. So that might be a good idea for you to practice that as well. But first we're going to try to do end to end. So I'm going to set these up end to end and try to pick solder them. And I need to do my flux first on both ends. I'm going to use my tweezers to place them side by side. I'm also going to grab a piece of solder. Now you can do this a couple of ways too. You can actually take the solder and place it underneath the wire, or do like I'm going to do and pick solder it. So I'm going to pick the solder up off my board with using my pick. If I can get it off the board. Trick is to heat the solder pick and not the solder, and that will pick up your solder easier. So I'm going to spend more time concentrating my heat on the larger piece because that's going to take longer to get up to temperature for soldering. and it should transfer heat to my smaller piece. There it went. Make sure it went all the way through. Oh, I didn't wait long enough. Darn it. Sometimes if the solder hasn't set, you can actually mess up your solder joint. It's not straight now. You notice it's crooked. So I'm going to reheat it and try and move it. There we go. It's another great thing about practicing your soldering skills. If your solder goes to a place where you don't want it to be, you can move it. Okay, that should be cool enough to move now. So now I got an end-to-end piece. Awesome. Excited about that too. You can also try and do a solder operation in a 90-degree angle. Here's the third piece. I'm going to go to a different section of my wire. Now, this isn't going to be perfect because I didn't prep this side here, but we're going to go ahead and try it anyway. See how it does. I do need to put some flux on my piece though. You can tell it's already picked up some of the heat from the other side. Now I'm making sure when I'm placing it next to the piece that there's a nice little surface area for the solder to adhere to. And I'm also going to pick solder this part as well. So I'm going to heat up the larger piece. It should transfer heat to the smaller piece. Place my solder. Let's see if we can get it to flow. It flowed, but not to both pieces. I want to make sure it gets to both. There we go. Now remember, when you're soldering, the area of heat that is the hottest is where the solder is going to flow. So if this side is hotter than that side, even if you're facing your torch, you think, in the right direction, you can always tell where the hottest part of the metal is because that's where the solder is going to flow. And in this case, the solder flowed right in this area, and I had to come back over on this side and try and reheat it to pull some more back here. Looks like it worked. It did. Now I can see right here that I don't have enough solder flow on the bottom part of my joint, so I'm going to reheat it and try and pull some of that solder through the top here. Yeah, it had a little bit of flow up there, but not as much as it should have. So it should drag the solder from below, from underneath, through that joint if I heat it correctly. And there it goes. I hope you can see that on the video. I'm gonna let it get a little cool, enough to set the solder, and then now you can see, now I have a little T-joint here. Not too shabby for being 9 months away from the bench. I'm kind of happy with myself right now. Woo woo! So those are a couple of things that you can do to practice soldering and to try and get your skills right back at the bench. A couple of things to check: make sure your joints are clean. Make sure that your flux is clean and active. If you use a liquid flux, it can dissipate and it won't work if it's been sitting out for too long. So I would recommend having a backup plan, having some paste solder on hand, or at least some fresh solution, stuff that hasn't been exposed to air, that you can use to flux the joint and make sure that it gives you a good clean surface for the solder to adhere to. I have to admit, that felt really good. It had been so long from being behind the bench that just that little tiny exercise, 5-10 minutes worth of exercise, was enough to get my brain remotivated to get back behind the bench. So I'm really excited. I will have a project for you on Friday, so stay tuned for that. If you have any questions or comments or just want to commiserate with me on this cycle of destruction that I've been in for the last 9 months, please do, because I know I'm not the only one out there. So look forward to the video next week. And please, like I said, if you have any comments or questions or ideas for videos, please leave them in the comment section below. I'd really love to hear from you. And I look forward to seeing you later on in the week. Bye.